Hey everyone! If you enjoy watching entertaining and informative content, then you definitely need to check out Real Members Only TV. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on your favorite videos to let us know what you love about our channel. We appreciate our viewers and look forward to bringing you more quality content. Thanks for supporting Real Members Only TV.
Time out, you know what I'm saying, to tap in with me, you know what I'm saying? Because my channel is basically one of the channels for the OGs, you know what I'm saying, for them to put down their history, you know what I'm saying, drop a little wisdom, a little knowledge from their era, you know what I'm saying, spread a few words to the youngsters out here on the streets, as well as drop some a few jewels for the old cats too, you know what I'm saying? I'm an OG too, from the south side of Chicago, the Inglewood, you know what I'm saying, area, you know what I'm saying, and I think it's really important that we get some type of documentation of all the different histories of the different cultures of the street organizations. You know what I'm saying, from the older cats, younger cats. So I'm glad to get you on here. I ain't gonna try to keep you too long because I know you're a busy man or whatever. But just give me going. Brush me up on who you is, your name, and where you from.
North side of Chicago, came up mostly by Logan Square, was the hood I was from. We came up folks in the 80s. I like to refer to that as the golden years.
Right.
You could walk around half the city and not have to look over your shoulder. It was great, and my particular club was on top, mostly because of a pact made at around 1978, 1980 between SCR and BGD in a series of warehouse club meetings that stemmed from some problems in prison. What happened was, before there was Folks and People in the 70s, the Royals had decided not to be a white power club. They were okay with minorities in the gang, even though they were predominantly white club. And when we started getting locked up, it became a problem because we couldn't identify with the WPO clubs. And on the outside, BGD was having trouble getting guns. So a deal was made that if we help them on the outside, they help us on the inside.
Okay.
And that's how the Folks was formed. And it took a little while to take hold. By early 80s, it was in full swing. And as a response, the Blackstone Rangers, Puerto Rican Stones, Blackstones, Vice Lords, Latin Kings, they formed the People Alliance to sort of counter it. And everyone in the whole city pretty much joined to one side or the other.
Right.
You were either riding the fork or throwing it down.
Right.
You were either riding the crown or throwing it down. And it was instant camaraderie wherever you went. A lot of times we'd be adventuring to the south side, checking out the south side hoods. Certain hoods we wouldn't get out on. Other hoods we get out, get high, talk to them, exchange cards, stuff like that, learn history. And that's another thing unique to Chicago, are the cards.
Right.
When you're a young bopper, everybody wants their name on the cards. And then once you start getting a collection going, you start learning all the neighborhoods and all the nicknames and all the histories. And it becomes your school outside of school.
Right.
Especially if you got a group of guys that likes to travel around and get around like we did. We were like the traveling version of our club, really, our section.
Right. Well, look. I want you to break down the card thing, because that's a it's not, I ain't gonna say a new lingo, but out south, saying we don't use that language, the card. Like, break that down. What does that mean to have a card, or what is a card? What does that mean?
Good question. That's a great stuff. A lot of history. It's very unique to Chicago.
Right.
The other LA and New York, they never really did cards like we did. That became a real big thing here. Started off kind of like a calling card, like you see in mob movies and everything, where or even the Joker leaves his Joker card, or a mafia member would leave his calling card, or book of matches, whatever.
Right.
So the idea was to have your logo and stuff. It was to send a message early on. Some of them had, early in the 50s and 60s, they had phone numbers and addresses, and some of them were turned into dance tickets. And it was a lot different back then. Everybody knew who everybody was. You could walk around at different neighborhoods and not get killed as long as you were respectful. But then as cards began to develop, they became more and more a thing, and they were really, really big. And card collecting, it became the #1 recruiting tool, because anyone that wanted to join a club automatically wanted their name on a card.
Mm.
So that was a good way to get to recruit guys in your neighborhood to join, because it made them feel important, just like the adults had. They all had business cards. Why shouldn't we
Right.
have business cards?
Right.
And then at first, before nicknames became a thing in the 50s and 60s, by the 70s and 80s, everybody had nicknames. So now it became real cool. You got nicknames on there. You identify with everyone. You start putting yourself on other cards, other clubs. You leave them out. You leave them anywhere. You leave them on people's corners. Along with a can of paint that you just used.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of what tagging came from then back then.
Tagging was just as big. Yeah, tagging. Tagging was always to signify turf early on.
Right.
And then it just got bigger and bigger. In the 80s, it really got big with murals. Murals were like, they got so beautiful, so big and colorful, and such like a place of war. You have guys standing around guarding the mural, and other guys driving by shooting at guys standing around in the mural.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That's like a
Right.
spot of war now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned a few different eras. You talked a little bit. You touched a little bit about the 80s. You mentioned the 50s and the 70s, and like you seem to have a little bit of information or knowledge or some history of different type of eras: 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Can
Yes.
you explain to me kind of how the street cultures or the gangs or the organizations kind of came about from the 50s to like the 70s? You know what I'm saying? Like it was probably a minimum amount of black people, majority Latino or whites, maybe. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to catch
I
that
completely
era.
understand what you're
When
asking.
did the blacks
I know
move
what you mean.
in?
Yeah, there was definitely an evolution of gangs and clubs. From we could even go back to, like, Al Capone time, 20s and 30s.
Right.
Dillinger. Okay, that was the cool. That would have been all adults. You saw gangs in New York even before that. The Irish back in the 1890s, stuff like that in New York. But
Right.
what really happened was, after World War II in 45, when everybody came home, there was a baby boom. And by the 50s, these baby boomers were growing up, and these were really the greaser gangs. This is
Okay.
really the advent of gangs as we knew it. Before it got Hispanic and black, it was mostly white kids growing
Right.
up before the white flight started in the 60s and 70s. It
Okay.
was, kind of like Grease, the movie Grease, that type of
Mhm.
thing. That movie was actually inspired by a writer who went to high school here on the Northwest Side in the 50s.
That's one of my
So
favorite movies.
that's
That and the
actually a
Warriors.
Chicago inspired film. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Most of the best gang stuff is all inspired by Chicago. Anyways, so what happened was, in the 50s, the white kids are bullies and stuff. They're the guys. They're their sons' kids. They're adapting war patches, like Simon City over at Simon Park on the west side on North Avenue. North Avenue was a hotbed in the 50s and 60s of gang activity, going from the near west side to the far west side. You had
Right.
a lot of gangs originate in that area, including the Latin Kings. So what happened was, in the 50s, at Drake and Wabansia, which is like Kimball and North Avenue area, there was a park called Simon's Park, and group of boys in that neighborhood, were greasers and formed their gang neighborhood club called Simon City.
Right.
And they became, known tough guys. Over by Chicago and Western was a club called Chi West, and then over by Ohio and Levitt was the C Notes. And these were all like racially based. They were
Okay.
Ukrainian over at Chi West. They were Irish over at Simon City, Irish and Italian, and they were Italian over at the C Notes over there. Everything was like that. And these were the mixed neighborhoods. These were the fights among, basically white guys fighting with white guys,
Right. The
but
Irish fight
very
Irish
ethnically
against
divided.
Italians.
Yeah, exactly. And so now you got the white flight coming in, where a lot of black families moving from the South. They chose Chicago, Illinois because of Lincoln,
Right.
and then a lot of Hispanics coming in, also being brought in the 60s and 70s. Families there with housing breaks and results of being soldiers in the war, that type of stuff. They were all like houses to be had, housing areas to be had, and it shifted things. So you saw a lot of white families move out to the suburbs, and you saw a lot of white families stay. And the ones
Right.
that stayed, you know, just like any kids growing up, it doesn't matter what the era is or what the color is. Just kids that age want to fight.
Right. Right.
Okay, so and I would say the Simon City guys were known as bullies, and the Hispanic kids in the neighborhood banded together around 1960 and formed what would become the Latin Kings, the largest street gang and known in the country, basically,
Right.
as far as I'm pretty sure how it goes. So it's interesting how the Simon City, and then later on when they merged with the Royals in 1969, after during Vietnam War, when guys were coming home from that, they helped form the people, the folks people paradigm, which is very important in our history.
Right.
But so let's go back. So now it's to the 60s. Now they're coming in. Now we're getting all kinds of clubs, Black and Hispanic gangs too, and it's getting all mixed up everywhere. But it's still at a respectful level. There's dances. There's everyone's respecting everybody as long as you take your sweater off, walk through the neighborhood, stuff like
Right.
that. I would hear, like on the north side in 1972, the Insane Popes went to the Latin Counts on 18th Street and little village there, or Pilsen, whatever that is, and exchange sweaters. That's a great story. 10
Right.
years later, they'd be sworn enemies because of the folks people paradigm. Not
Right.
that they were on each other's radar. You know what I mean? They're totally different sides of the city. There's no Insane Pope cards on the north side that say Latin Count Killer on it. Not because they wouldn't honor the paradigm. It's because they're nowhere near them. They have no beef with them, so
Right.
to speak.
Okay. Okay.
So that was a weird thing about the folks people paradigm, is you automatically had to be enemies with guys you might have been united with before, and you had to be automatically become friends with guys you were enemies with before, and that was
True.
particularly hard for, like, say, like the Royals and Latin Eagles. Latin Eagles killed some of our main original leaders and stuff. It was very hard to get over that. It took about 2 or 3 years before we agreed to be nice with them, even though we were both folks.
Oh.